What is going on with this kid?
Toshio!
What was the point of having the character behave as he did? Was there a point? Toshio, whether intentionally or otherwise, is a trailblazer.
Anyone who has seen 1965's Giant Monster Gamera will have certainly noticed the young Toshio, or Kenny depending on which version you watch, a child who exhibits unusual, even alarming behavior. Now, for the first time, this curious case has been brought to the attention of a mental health professional. I'm Tyler Martin, and this is Monsters from the Id. The Cold War is in full swing. In the Arctic Circle, an unidentified plane carrying atomic weapons is shot down, releasing the colossal turtle monster Gamera from his icy slumber. The world's scientists scramble to find a solution as this seemingly indestructible creature wreaks havoc across Japan. In the midst of all this is Toshio, a reclusive boy who is fascinated by turtles. He lives with his father and older sister. His mother passed away when he was very young, and he has transferred schools multiple times due to his father's work as a lighthouse keeper. All this seems to have taken a toll on the lad, who forsakes human interaction, instead spending time with his pet turtle. When Gamera shows up, Toshio becomes convinced that there is a bond between himself and the monster. Giant Monster Gamera was the first of many Japanese monster movies to feature a child in a prominent role, but none of the kids who followed were quite like Toshio, who has become a source of bewilderment for viewers, with some describing him as weird, nuts, or dangerously unwell. Clearly, this kid is a bit of a puzzle. It is, of course, possible that the character ended up this way by sheer chance, a product of haphazard writing, but his behavior corresponds with known patterns to such an extent that a coincidence might seem extraordinary to some. The obvious aim was to include a child character for the benefit of youngsters in the audience, but why depict him in this uncannily specific way? We may never know for sure, as screenwriter Nisan Takahashi and director Noriaki Yuasa have long since passed on. The best we can do is guess. For answers, I did what more people should do. I sought professional help. Bethany Killian is a licensed therapist who kindly lent her time and expertise to help unpack the trouble with Toshio.
If we're going to answer these questions to some level of satisfaction, I think we have a few options we can consider. The writers unintentionally created a character that could be interpreted as having psychotic processes and delusions. Let's dig into that one first. In order to understand what psychotic processes and delusions mean for the character, we need to get some basic definitions out of the way. First things first, what is psychosis? Broadly speaking, psychosis is defined as thought processes or behaviors that indicate an individual has lost touch with reality. This person could pose a threat to themselves or another person because their behavior is unpredictable. Delusion. A delusion is a thought or idea that the individual holds as irrefutable fact that is not grounded in reality. We could say that Toshio exhibits psychotic processes in his repeated, dangerous attempts to get close to Gamera. Toshio runs headlong for him, trying to get as close as humanly possible. It is only when he starts to fall that he realizes he's in danger. Thankfully, Gamera saves him, but this lays the groundwork for the rest of his attempts to reach Gamera. Attempt number 2, he is seen trying to cross an oil refinery and puts himself and the refinery foreman in active danger. We can clearly see him fighting the foreman who is just trying to keep him safe. So one could argue that the foreman was disrupting Toshio's psychotic process, and Toshio didn't like that. Attempt number 3. He stows away in a crate and sneaks himself onto a top-secret military base without a moment's hesitation. Let's go into the delusions. The most prominent being this connection that he claims to have with Gamera. So intense is this connection that he claims to be able to know what Gamera is thinking and where Gamera is going. He says Gamera is lonely, Gamera is hungry, Gamera doesn't mean to be bad, as if he knows exactly what the kaiju is thinking. Now, you and I both know he doesn't, but he's convinced he does. So, we could interpret this as delusions. In that case, then, we could just diagnose him as a delusional psychotic and move on. But I have a few problems with this theory. Not the least of which being, this movie was targeted for children. It would not benefit the studio to depict a child whom the audience is supposed to connect with as going through psychotic processes and delusions. Secondly, to diagnose a child as psychotic is not only dubious, it's cruel. Now, I'm not saying that children can't exhibit psychotic processes. They can, but it is exceedingly rare. In fact, we don't usually see psychosis until late teens, early 20s. There is still a fair matter of debate as to when, in terms of age, it is okay to start diagnosing children. As it stands, the general agreed upon age is 6 years old, but some would argue even that's still too young. Because what we don't want to do is pathologize childhood. Now, I'm not saying that some of Toshio's behavior isn't problematic or worrisome, because it absolutely is. But I am saying that labeling him as psychotic is a really heavy choice. A clinician has to be exceedingly careful and exceedingly mindful of these factors before they slap a label of psychotic on someone, because there are conditions that we know of and recognize today that would far better explain Toshio's lived experience than to just label him as a delusional psychotic. So if it's not poor writing and he's not crazy, what is going on with this kid? Toshio, whether intentionally or otherwise, is a trailblazer. The way his character is written, I, as a clinician in 2025, can absolutely see characteristics that we would now recognize as neurodivergence. So in that way, the fact that this character was depicted from the mid-60s and is a fairly honest depiction of neurodivergence is pretty revolutionary and well before his time. Anyone with any passing access to the internet or other forms of major media has probably heard the term neurodivergent. But what does it mean? Neurodivergence is defined as experiencing neurological or mental processes that result in an individual behaving in ways that differ from the norm. So, I could stop there and I could say, Toshio's not crazy, he's neurodivergent, and technically that meets the brief, but we can keep it more interesting because we can go, what kind of neurodivergent? When we first meet Toshio, it becomes plainly clear that he has a quote-unquote obsession with turtles. However, a clinician would look at this and all of his behavior surrounding turtles and go, oh wonderful, he's found a special interest. Now, the term special interest and hyperfixation are used interchangeably in both clinical and non-clinical settings, but we should know that they are slightly different. A special interest refers to the subject itself, be it history, animals, magic, whatever your special interest is. A hyperfixation usually indicates the duration and intensity in which the individual devotes most of their time and attention to that special interest. In Toshio's case, he is in full hyper-focus mode around his turtle, Chibi, and therefore turtles in general. Chibi becomes the only thing he wants to think about, the only thing he wants to interact with, to such a degree that his school is suffering. He has been labeled a distraction, so it stands to reason that his academic performance is suffering. His family is suffering because they are frustrated and they don't know what to do with him. This is actually very common in families dealing with an undiagnosed neurodivergent child. It's not that they are angry at the kid, it's that they are lost and they don't know how to help. So when we see Toshio's sister get a little frustrated, and when we see Toshio's father try bribery first and then threaten to release the turtle, is it a little harsh? Maybe. But is it completely understandable? Yes. Not because they don't like the kid or they're trying to punish him, but they're genuinely scared that his odd behavior could lead to problems in the future. Toshio's sister outright says this: "We don't want you to become a recluse. We want you to enjoy things other than this turtle." So this fear is coming from a place of love. In that sense, I cannot fault Toshio's guardians in any way. So he has this hyperfixation on turtles. And in taking care of Chibi, he finds a sense of satisfaction, a sense of purpose. He finds a friend, someone he can talk to, someone he can show care for. Another clue can be found in the way he interacts with Gamera after Gamera appears. There is a trait that we typically see in children known as disinhibition. Let's break that word down a little bit. Dis meaning without, and inhibition. Now, most of us know what inhibition is. It's that feeling we get, that moment of hesitation we get before we're about to do something potentially risky or embarrassing. Most of us will yield to it and not do the thing. Disinhibition, however, is a condition in which the child either doesn't feel that signal as strongly as they could, or is able to compartmentalize that signal to do what they're wanting to do regardless of any potential danger. So, rather than an underlying psychotic process, Toshio let his curiosity overrule his common sense, and he makes a beeline for Gamera multiple times. Now, this does not mean that his behavior is excusable. He is clearly putting himself in danger and others in danger, and so that impulsivity would need to be addressed, and it would need to be addressed in a supportive clinical setting. So, he has hyperfixations. He has disinhibition. What else does he have? We know he is intelligent. We know he is very empathetic. We see this multiple times as he advocates for Gamera and pleads with the adults in the room to have mercy. We know he is highly creative. If Toshio were to walk into my office today, he would be a prime candidate for a diagnostic battery intended to look for autism spectrum disorder. Now, autism, while very different from psychosis, is also one of those conditions that carries a lot of weight and social stigma attached to it. So it's not one of those conditions that we want to assign flippantly. Therefore, we would want to make sure that he gets the best battery possible to confirm beyond the shadow of a clinical doubt that he has autism. So that would need to be done by a professional specifically trained to test for autism spectrum disorder. So while we were waiting for the results of his tests, I would talk to him about his loneliness and social isolation. Loneliness and social isolation are hallmarks of both children with ASD and adults diagnosed later in life. It is almost standard procedure that they report chronic experiences of social isolation and loneliness as a result of their being strange. They report difficulty making friends, difficulty understanding social cues, difficulty understanding when not to share and when to share, difficulty navigating sudden change, difficulty navigating social experiences such as parties. And this struggle leaves them often feeling alien or weird, or maybe even a bit like a monster because of the way people react to them. And so as we talked about his loneliness, he would tell me, I would bet, something along the lines of, I don't feel comfortable talking to my family about my feelings, or I don't feel like they have the time to listen. I don't want to bother them. So instead, I turn all my attention to Chibi, and Chibi is my friend. So, if Chibi is his emotional outlet, in which he is able to explore and express all of these feelings of loneliness and feel feelings of camaraderie, then it makes perfect sense why he attached so strongly to Gamera. We see it actually depicted in the scene where he's looking for Chibi and he slowly realizes that Chibi is gone. You see it on his face. His face falls slowly, his voice gets weak. The sadness, the devastation sets in. He's lost his only friend. And that is an unbearable pain to him. And then, as he's thinking about it, he remembers Gamera, and he goes, wait a minute, Chibi lives in the ocean. Gamera lives in the ocean. Gamera saved me. Chibi must be Gamera. Is it correct? No. But does it make sense to the mind of a very lonely child? Absolutely. So, it stands to reason then that of course he would try to pursue Gamera, because Gamera is his friend, and he wants to make sure his friend gets taken care of. So, his connection with Gamera is not a delusion, but merely an extension of him trying to express and protect his friendship. So, in conclusion, I genuinely believe that Toshio was ahead of his time, and a depiction of a neurodivergent child trying to navigate the world of a kaiju film.
Viewers have long commented on Toshio's idiosyncrasies, but to the best of my knowledge, this is the first time his case has been referred to a professional. I would like to thank Bethany for taking the time and effort to give him a fair shake. If you or someone you know experiences tendencies or symptoms like those discussed in today's episode, you're not alone. It's always okay to seek help. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more Monsters from the Id. As always, thank you for joining me. I'll see you next time.